My name is Olivia Brennan, and 5 years ago, I did something that still keeps me awake at night. I testified in court against Dr. Marcus Hale, one of the most respected surgeons in Chicago, and when the verdict was read, the silence in that courtroom was so thick you could almost touch it. What I'm about to tell you isn't just about right and wrong, it's about the weight of choosing truth when everyone around you wants you to stay silent. And believe me, the cost of that choice was higher than I ever imagined. Before we dive into this story, I want you to comment below where you're watching from, because what happened in that courtroom could happen anywhere, in any hospital. And if this story grabs you from the start, subscribe now, because what unfolds next is something you won't want to miss. I grew up in Minneapolis, where winters are brutal and people are tougher because of it. My mother was a teacher, my father worked construction, and they taught me early that honesty wasn't just a virtue, it was survival. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people, plain and simple. 7 years ago, I moved to Chicago for a position at Mercy General Hospital, one of the largest medical centers in the Midwest. The city was overwhelming at first. The noise, the traffic, the sheer density of humanity crammed into steel and glass towers. But I fell in love with it. Chicago has a pulse you can feel in your chest, especially in the fall when the wind cuts through Michigan Avenue and the leaves turn amber and gold. I worked in the surgical unit, 12-hour shifts that blurred into each other, but I loved every minute. And then there was Dr. Marcus Hale. Everyone knew his name. He was brilliant, charismatic, the kind of surgeon who could perform miracles with a scalpel. I admired him. We all did. But admiration, I would learn, can blind you to the truth. If this story already got your attention, subscribe now, because what's coming next will surprise you even more. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was subtle. A patient chart that didn't match the surgery notes. A prescription dosage that seemed off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Dr. Hale was too experienced to make mistakes like that, but then it kept happening. Patients who should have recovered quickly came back with complications, infections that didn't make sense, internal bleeding that shouldn't have occurred. I started paying closer attention during his surgeries. He was still brilliant, still confident, but there was something different. His hands shook sometimes, his eyes were glassy. One night, after a particularly long surgery, I found him in the break room, slumped over a cup of coffee. When he looked up at me, his pupils were dilated, his speech just slightly slurred. He laughed it off, said he was exhausted, and I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was happening. I started talking to other nurses quietly, carefully. They had noticed things too, altered records, unexplained complications, patients' families asking questions that went unanswered, but no one wanted to say anything. Dr. Hale was untouchable. The hospital protected him because he brought in money, prestige, accolades, and we were just nurses. Who would believe us? Thank you for staying with me so far. That means you felt what I felt when I lived through all this. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because everything is about to change. Then came the case that shattered everything. Her name was Alicia Moreno. She was 28 years old, a kindergarten teacher with a bright smile and her whole life ahead of her. She came in for a routine gallbladder removal. Simple, straightforward, something Dr. Hale could do in his sleep. But that day, something went catastrophically wrong. I was in the OR assisting, and I saw it happen. Dr. Hale's movements were sluggish, imprecise. He nicked the hepatic artery. Blood flooded the surgical field. We tried everything to save her, but she died on that table. Afterward, I checked the records. Dr. Hale had altered them, claiming complications that didn't exist, procedures that were never performed. He was covering his tracks. I stood in that empty hallway outside the OR, my scrubs still stained with Alicia's blood, and I made a choice. I could pretend I didn't see what I saw. I could go home, take a shower, and move on with my life. Or I could do something that would change everything. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my husband David. He begged me not to get involved, said it would destroy my career, maybe even put me in danger. But I kept seeing Alicia's face, kept thinking about her family waiting in that cold hospital lobby for news that would never be good. Now I want to know, where are you watching from? Write it in the comments. It's amazing to see people from all over connecting through stories like this. I went to the hospital's risk management department first. They listened politely, took notes, and then did absolutely nothing. A week later, I was called into the chief of surgery's office. He told me I was overreacting, that Dr. Hale was one of their best, that these things happen in medicine. He suggested I take some time off, said the stress of the job was getting to me. That's when I realized the hospital wasn't going to help. They were going to bury it, so I went to the police. I brought copies of the medical records, photographs I had taken of discrepancies, witness statements from other nurses who were too afraid to come forward themselves. The detective who took my statement looked at me like I was either very brave or very stupid. Maybe I was both. The investigation started quietly, but word got out fast. Within days, everyone at the hospital knew I was the one who had reported Dr. Hale. The atmosphere changed overnight. Colleagues who used to eat lunch with me suddenly had other plans. Nurses I had mentored stopped making eye contact. Someone spray-painted "rat" on my car in the hospital parking garage. My phone rang at all hours with blocked numbers, heavy breathing on the other end. David and I started fighting constantly. He said I was ruining our lives over something that wasn't my responsibility. The months leading up to the trial were the darkest of my life. Dr. Hale's lawyers tried everything to discredit me. They dug into my past, found a minor medication error I had made years ago, and tried to paint me as incompetent. They questioned my mental health, suggested I was delusional, bitter, jealous of Dr. Hale's success. The hospital placed me on administrative leave, which was just a polite way of pushing me out. I spent my days meeting with prosecutors, reviewing mountains of medical records, preparing for what I knew would be the fight of my life. The legal team explained that cases like this were incredibly difficult to win. Doctors have powerful legal representation, professional immunity protections, and the benefit of doubt. Nurses, on the other hand, are seen as subordinate, emotional, unreliable witnesses. But they also told me that my testimony, combined with the physical evidence, could make the difference. I learned everything I could about medical malpractice law, about how expert witnesses testify, about how to present technical information in a way a jury could understand. I practiced my testimony over and over until the words felt hollow in my mouth. David moved out 3 weeks before the trial. He said he couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. I didn't blame him. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but it felt like years. The courtroom was packed every day. Media, hospital staff, medical students, Alicia's family. I'll never forget walking into that room for the first time, seeing Dr. Hale sitting at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking confident and unbothered. When it was my turn to testify, my legs shook so badly, I thought I might collapse before I reached the witness stand. The prosecutor walked me through everything methodically, my background, my experience, the events of that day in the OR. I explained how I had noticed Dr. Hale's erratic behavior, how I had documented everything, how I had tried to report it through proper channels. Then came the cross-examination. Dr. Hale's attorney was ruthless. He accused me of fabricating evidence because I had been passed over for a promotion. He suggested I was romantically obsessed with Dr. Hale, and this was revenge for rejection. He tried to twist every word I said to make me seem vindictive and unstable, but I held firm. I looked at the jury and told them the truth, that Alicia Moreno died because a surgeon operated while impaired, and that the hospital had protected him instead of their patients. If this part moved you, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now and turn on that bell so you don't miss the conclusion of this story. The next chapter will touch your heart in a special way. And then, Dr. Hale took the stand. He was everything I wasn't: polished, articulate, commanding. He painted himself as a dedicated physician who had devoted his life to saving others. He claimed that Alicia's death was a tragic but unavoidable complication, that I was a disgruntled employee with a personal vendetta. He showed the jury awards he had won, letters from grateful patients, testimonials from colleagues. For a moment, I thought I had lost. But then the prosecutor presented the toxicology report. On the day Alicia died, Dr. Hale had opioids in his system, prescription medication he later admitted he had been taking without proper oversight. The prosecutor also showed the original medical records I had photographed before they were altered, placing them side by side with the falsified versions Dr. Hale had submitted. The courtroom went silent. You could hear people breathing. Dr. Hale's expression changed. The confidence cracked, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. His attorney tried to do damage control, arguing that the medication was prescribed for chronic pain, that the alterations were administrative corrections, not fraud. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw it. The judge saw it. Everyone saw it. Now you understand why this story isn't just a report, but a lesson in faith and courage. So, before moving forward, subscribe to the channel, because the ending will give you goosebumps and renew your hope. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of waiting, of checking my phone every 5 minutes, of imagining every possible outcome. I stayed with my sister during that time because I couldn't bear to be alone. She kept telling me that whatever happened, I had done the right thing. But doubt crept in during those long nights. What if the jury believed Dr. Hale? What if all of this, the destroyed career, the ended marriage, the isolation, was for nothing? I thought about Alicia's parents, who had attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row with photographs of their daughter clutched in their hands. I thought about all the other patients who might have been harmed, who might never know the truth. On the morning of the verdict, I wore the same navy dress I had worn on the first day of the trial. I didn't eat breakfast. I couldn't. My sister drove me to the courthouse, and we sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes because I was too terrified to go inside. When we finally walked into that courtroom, the air felt electric with anticipation. Media cameras lined the back wall. Every seat was filled. And there was Dr. Hale, looking smaller somehow, his shoulders tight with tension. If this story touched you in any way, show it by subscribing now. Every subscription helps spread more faith, more love, and more real stories that transform lives. And the judge entered, and we all stood. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreman stood, holding a piece of paper that contained the answer to everything. The judge asked if they had reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor." And then came the silence. Not the absence of sound, but something heavier, more profound. The weight of a moment that would define everything that came after. The foreman cleared his throat and read, "In the case of the state versus Dr. Marcus Hale, on the charge of criminally negligent homicide, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty." The word hung in the air like smoke. Someone in the gallery gasped. Alicia's mother let out a sob and buried her face in her husband's shoulder. Dr. Hale's face went white, his mouth opening slightly as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. His attorney put a hand on his arm, but Dr. Hale shook it off. The judge continued reading the verdict. Guilty on charges of falsifying medical records. Guilty on charges of practicing medicine while impaired. Each word felt like a vindication, but also like a weight. I had won, but at what cost? The sentencing came 2 months later. Dr. Hale received 8 years in prison and the permanent revocation of his medical license. Alicia's family read victim impact statements that left everyone in the courtroom in tears. They thanked me, called me brave, said I had given them the justice their daughter deserved. But when I walked out of that courthouse for the last time, I felt empty. I had lost my job, my marriage, most of my friends. The nursing community was divided. Some saw me as a hero, others as a traitor who had violated the unspoken code of professional loyalty. I couldn't find work in Chicago, so I moved to Portland, Oregon, and started over. It took me a year to find a hospital willing to hire me. Even now, 5 years later, some colleagues treat me differently when they learn what I did. But here's what I know. Alicia Moreno mattered. Her life mattered, and her death mattered, and someone needed to stand up and say that out loud. Would I do it again, knowing everything I know now? Honestly, I don't know, but I can sleep at night, and that's something Dr. Hale will never be able to say. The truth has a cost, and I paid it willingly. This story ends here, but its message lives on. Subscribe now and turn on that bell, so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories of faith, miracle, and overcoming that we have prepared for you.